So you've written this excellent book, The Immortality Key, and maybe we can start with your background and how it is you came to write this book.
So I started with a relatively useless major in Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, and was supposed to either go to seminary or become a classics professor. And neither of those worked out. So I went to law school and practiced law. I'm still practicing law, actually, for the past 15 years. But eventually I couldn't quite leave the mysteries behind. So this was kind of my nights and weekends, Indiana Jones one-man hunt for the scientific evidence to prove the best kept secret in history.
And am I right that this got sparked by reading about the Hopkins research into psilocybin and the way it helps people overcome fear of death when they have terminal cancer?
Exactly. I mean, it's a true story. In 2007, I'm sitting on the 57th floor of my law firm building, a block from Wall Street, and I pick up The Economist, and there's this short article called "The God Pill" about some of the early experiments at Johns Hopkins University with psilocybin. And in there was that crazy stat about 2/3 of the volunteers claiming it was among the most meaningful experiences of their lives. And even at that moment, I knew there was something. And turns out all these years later, that stat is now 75%, believe it or not. If you talk to Roland Griffiths at Hopkins, he will tell you that 3 in 4 people who go through one of these clinically controlled trials with psilocybin will wind up describing it as either the single most meaningful experience of their lives or among the top 5. And when you see something like that, you can draw several conclusions or speculations. And for me, I went straight back to the ancient world. This whole hunt for ancient intoxicants was not my hunt. There's been a lot of crazy theories out there since at least the 1970s and probably before. But when I saw that kind of psychopharmacology that was investigating these states of awareness, I figured, here's something, here's a new break in the case.
Right. And so in these experiments, you have people taking these high doses, they experience what might be called ego dissolution, right? And they have this kind of religious experience that relates to death and rebirth, and it's this profound spiritual experience. And I guess for you, you saw this as hearkening to parallels in Christianity or in religion in general, as well as in the ancient world? Because the book is about the idea that the Christian sacrament might have been something comparable, right?
Right, that's part of the book. So I spend the entire second half of the book investigating Paleo-Christianity. But the first thing I thought of was Eleusis, because this volunteer testimony struck me as very similar to some of the testimony that survived from the ancient world about Eleusis, which, for those who don't know, is kind of the spiritual capital of the ancient Mediterranean. It lasts for about 2,000 years, from 1500, give or take, BC to the 4th century AD, when it's obliterated under the Christianized Roman Empire. But it included initiates, everyone from Plato, Pindar, Sophocles, to Marcus Aurelius centuries later. And because everything was secret, there's only so much that we can infer from what was happening there. But we do know that some kind of vision, and Carl Karenyi, gold standard scholar of the classics, calls it the beatific vision. I mean, actually using the language from Christianity, like you just mentioned, because whatever was happening there was something profound and transformative. It was a once in a lifetime event, also very similar to the experiments at Hopkins, a one and only intervention. And folks like everyone from Plato to Marcus Aurelius walked away claiming they'd become gods, that they had this beatific vision and they were guaranteed some kind of afterlife from this one and only intervention. And so for me, the first thing I thought about when I was reading that article, The God Pill, was Eleusis, and it was off from there.
Right. And so I guess your argument, as you say, is kind of in 2 parts, right? You have the first part is, well, was there some substance that was psychedelic in some sense, producing these beatific visions in ancient Greece? And then is it plausible that the Christian sacrament that we now have as, the bread and wine was some carryover from that, right? Some kind of carrying on that tradition of some kind of spiked wine.
Right, exactly. Those are the 2 big questions I'm trying to answer. And what was happening in 2007, 2008 already is I was seeing some of the psychopharmacology investigate this. And as a good practicing lawyer, I'm the first one to say that that evidence is circumstantial at best, but it is an interesting clue as to what happens in the mind on these substances, because our neurochemistry hasn't changed in the past 2,000 years. let alone the past 20,000 or 200,000. So if it's happening today, it's a little clue to what may have been happening a couple thousand years ago. But there was this other science that was kind of coming online. At least it was new for me, and it's still a relatively new discipline, archaeochemistry. And these are folks going out into the field, into excavations, finding chalices, cups, containers, vessels, etc., testing them with a battery of high-tech instrumentation, including gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and all this wonky stuff. But the point of it is that they're finding things. They're finding trace elements of what our ancestors actually consumed in antiquity, which is, again, another break in the case and a relatively new science that is putting some meat onto the bones of what was otherwise high speculation. I mean, I think informed speculation, but speculation nonetheless from 40 years ago. And now we have the science to attack this stuff, which for me is super exciting.